Alors, nous allons avoir...
So, we'll have a round table, which is a bit special because now we want to look at existing corporations in the nuclear sector. So, we're not going to repeat again what's the point of Orano, Andra, and so on and so forth, but we will propose to look at how those major companies in the industry are working or not in cooperation with the others, and how we can make the projects go forward on spent fuel treatment management, waste management, education and training, and innovations especially. We talked about the SMRs before, and we'll come back to this. Now I would like to call on stage Armand LAFERRERE from Orano, Gabriel PAVEL from LENAN, which is a European Nuclear Education Network. It's a network. He will tell us more about this. Daniel DELORT from the International Relations Department, ANDRA, and Luc van der DURPEL, Director of Nuclear 21, working on all those innovations. And I will start with Armand. Armand, you have the floor, so Orano, you're going to tell us more about your company and how you work with everyone.
I've been giving speeches in English for 20 years, although I'm French myself, and so I've kind of lost the knack at speaking French in public. Mais je vais essayer quand même de parler français, parce que je crois qu'en fait, il y a une majorité.
But I will try my hand at speaking French, because I think that the vast majority of you does speak French. So I'll avail myself of the possibility of speaking French. We're here to talk about cooperation. I am a company representative, and I won't be speaking about any specific cooperation between companies. I know that there are journalists in the room. I'd like to talk about cooperation and the degree to which it could benefit the future of Europe. I know that EDF is actually quite well represented here, but I will be mainly talking about where there should be more cooperation among companies, but also cooperation between companies and public authorities and among member states, because very often it is usually because of member states that there is a slowdown. I have a couple of slides. I'm not here going to talk about Orano. That's not the purpose of me being present here. You see here the scope of the need. This is something that I know by heart, because unlike what many people may be tempted to believe here in Brussels, we are a growing industry. Our industry will continue growing, whatever the Europeans do. I remember, 11 years ago already. Oh, no. 10 years ago, I was in Japan, and there's the neighbor is China, and there's now 54 reactors in China. There used to be 24 10 years ago. In 1 year time, they will have more reactors than in France. China is certainly the most striking example. But look at the number of projects. And it tends to show that we are a growing industry. And I must say that the needs are very strong, and it's easier to meet the needs provided we can close ranks and we can define a common strategy. I must say that this common strategy has been very long in coming, and I will spend the rest of my speaking time to the next slide, meaning to say that I've spoken for 2 minutes. I guess that I only have 8 minutes left. That is correct. So this gives you an idea of where Orano is active and which are the avenues for cooperation in Europe. This may be counterintuitive, but this is the reality. We've got the mining sector and the uranium sector. This is one of the rare sectors today where there are no problems. The increase in demand that can be accepted will not have any problem in having an increase in the supply. There are projects that have been put on the back burner, but they are ready to go as soon as they get the signal to start again. So there's nothing to worry about, there's no cause for concern. And the origin of the uranium is highly diversified. So one should not worry about this particular sector of uranium. There is another sector that is slightly more complicated. This is uranium processing. You've got the yellow cakes coming from mines, and you've got the enriched uranium that you use in the fuel mixes. I must say that the increase in the global demand has experienced some limits in terms of production capacity. Those limits are much more important if you take into consideration the geopolitical situation, because ever since President Putin, and by the way, there is a very nice image, above my left shoulder if you look up. So Putin decided to invade one of his neighbors, but Europe continues, and this is certainly the most reasonable solution. And Europe continues to depend on the Russian enrichment and processing. But there is a great deal of uncertainty regarding the future of this cooperation. And so, in order to face those uncertainties, we need not only sever ties that would result in a real shortage, but one should opt for a risk management approach. Orano, and we're not the only one, mind you, there are representatives from the different authorities who are here, who can give you a confirmation of what I'm about to say. Risk management is something that must be done in the framework of a cooperation. Let me explain. The European producers will likely increase their capacity, because maybe tomorrow we might need to do with nothing coming from Russia. We don't know what the future holds in store for us, but we need to cope with this uncertainty. In order to increase the capacity, if you're a company, you need orders. The problem is that orders for an investment that's going to take 5 to 7 years at least, well, those orders must account for a demand that will still be there after the investment, meaning to say that we need long-term contracts. You all have heard the narratives from the European Commission, and you've heard them say that the long-term contracts, this is not good, this is anti-competitive. But if we don't have these long-term contracts, there's no way we can invest. And if we can't invest, the problem is that we will still be in the hands of a superpower, and we have no certainty about what is going to happen. There comes a time when we need really to take things into our hands, and we should move away from this traditionally accepted narrative that comes from the neoliberal circles. We need to do things differently, but for this we need to cooperate. You need to sit around the table, and you need to agree on how you're going to move on, and which are the tactics that you're going to use. It's true that we find ourselves in a situation in which the likely withdrawal of the Russian actor may lead to shortages if nothing is done. And we should prevent against those shortages. I'm not here talking about the reactors nor about the fuels. This is not our core business. I would like to talk about the back end. What do we do with the spent fuel? What about spent fuel, but what also about waste? There is a paradox. Over the short term, every country says, don't you worry, I've got a strategy, I've got a plan, I've got a facility. And it's true. This is true, politically speaking. But mind you, there are very few countries which have a strategy that is compatible with the length of the problem. The final nuclear waste mainly have a problem of time. You need to protect yourselves against this for thousands and thousands of years. There are very few countries who have worked on this. France is one, as well as Finland, and this might be about it. You know, there are some countries which have developed a plan for the next coming centuries, but we need to take the long view here. A solution is to ensure environmental protection that is ensured by a geological depository. Another solution is to work together, is really to work hand in hand and to properly address the issue of the final waste. I know that bakelite can be used as a fuel, and we know that here we talk about not several years, but centuries. And we know that there is a technology, which is the molten salt technology, and Orano has taken a particular interest in this technology because our industry needs to provide an answer to this legitimate question coming from the public opinion. How do you intend to protect us against those waste? What about our grandchildren, our grandchildren? So I think that there is certainly room for a European cooperation. There is also another aspect for which European cooperation would be more than welcome. It would be to provide support for the new reactors, SMRs, advanced reactors. There is a real proliferation. This is really exciting and very interesting, but my guess is that only the fittest are going to survive, like Darwin said. And most of these projects come from brilliant engineers who've worked on reactors. It relies on concepts, on new types of fuels. It goes literally in every direction. This is very exciting, but the day when this happens, we need to secure an industry. You need to secure a supply chain, and for this you will need the industry. The problem is that the U.S. does not have the same industrial level as the one that we've got here in Europe. It's about time for Europe to take up a position. Europe should promote its own SMRs and should also provide support to those coming from the US. They might have projects, but they don't really have a cycle industry. And it's going to take not only one actor. There will be a need to forge alliances so that the transition to SMRs and to advanced reactors is a stunning success. It's very interesting from the point of view of the speed involved in building those reactors. They can be built very fast. It could be a protection against a geopolitical risk. And this is it, Claude. I think that I've exhausted my 10-minute slot. I must say that I feel very uncomfortable because Christophe Gudler is just connected, and I suggest that we give you the floor a bit later. I suggest that we hear from another speaker. And this time we're going to talk about training and education and the challenges that we are presented in terms of training and education. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Gabriel.
As I was invited to discuss about skills and apprenticeship, the urgent need to develop national training and equip it with a European dimension. Next one, please. So I splitted my presentation into two parts. First sentence, skills and what to do with them. So my first question towards everybody is, who needs those skills? Next one, please. I borrowed this slide from my previous president, Mr. Leon Cizeli, who for many years had this question, know why versus know how. What was he trying to say with this slide? Know how, let me start from the left-hand side. Know how means that person needs to acquire some skills, needs to receive some experience into having an idea on how things are working. Who is benefiting from this? In short, the industry, the knowledge communities. This is the main recipient of the person who is trained to respond to the question how it works. On the right-hand side, you can see the part which is dealing with the know why. And who needs this know why? Basically, this know why is needed at the level of, let's say, inventors, to use a nice word, maybe a big word. The ones that are looking for ideas, the ones that are looking to improve something. Because the ones who are answering the question, why is this working, are the ones who already have an answer to the question, how this is working. Now, the big problem here is putting those two together. This is the big problem. Why? Because know why it's addressed by the academia. And oftenly, you don't see those two parts mixed together. Okay, next one, please. Now, when it comes to nuclear education, this, let's say the purpose of this meeting is about energy. But when we speak about nuclear, it's not only energy. I left energy on purpose at the end. When we speak about nuclear, we need to speak about medicine, we need to speak about agriculture, we need to speak about security of energy, and so on. We need to speak about many things when it comes to nuclear. Now, coming back to the next slide, thank you. The urgent need to develop national training and equip it with a European dimension. This is the second part of my presentation, and I will try to deal with what I was saying at the beginning, the couple of those two things. So, I presented to you that this nuclear is not only about energy. Now, do we need nuclearists, or do we need people that are trained into nuclear field? My basic answer is yes to this question. So I have a simple answer. It's yes. Why do we need them? Because there are running installations that needs people, because there are new intentions to build the power plants, and I'm starting with France. Again, we need these people. I left that on purpose in the middle, the new technologies. Why? I'm going to show you later on why I left SMRs in the middle. But again, this is another area that needs people. And up to now, I have been to over 1.5 months of, let's say, continuous travels to different meetings. Nobody talked about SMR, education and SMRs. Nobody. Then, the last one, non-power applications. Of course, also this is nuclear medicine. It's not something that you do not know, that you're not aware of. Nuclear medicine needs a lot of people trained in nuclear, in radiation protection more precisely. Next one, please. Okay. There is a big question here. Who reacts to these needs? Who is happy to have these needs? Who is happy to support these needs? And by talking to Claude, she told me, let's say, national authorities, it's difficult to get a support directly from national authorities when it comes to education. Why is that? Because usually, at least in Europe, education, it's at the level of a ministry. So you have dedicated, let's say, political area which is dedicated to education. You do not have something dedicated to nuclear education. So when it comes to this level, you need to have, let's say, an approach which is equal to all other fields of education. So that's why it's difficult to impose, let's say, bringing an advantage to the education in nuclear field. Companies, I have seen very few companies which are, or very few countries which have companies actively investing in nuclear education. European Commission, I put it with green because I have a good experience. At least my institution is financed almost 20 years now, is financed through European Commission funded projects in the nuclear field. So indeed, European Commission, at least in my case, it played a special role, a special positive role. And I have another very nice yes. This is for the youngsters. I told you about the SMRs. Apparently, these new technologies or these new prospects, these new, let's say, good news that arose in the recent years became a good point of attraction for new people. And I gave here 3 examples. 3 places, I especially chose them on purpose, so starting with the previous one, please. Okay. In Belgium, in Romania, in Slovenia, in Austria, I have good news that the students enrolled in these universities are on an increasing trend. But who supports them? Next one, please. Okay, and this I will leave it to you. Just some, let's say, information about ENEN, or who is European Education Network. That's a network made of more than 80 members. And we are running projects, educational and training projects, all of them dedicated to increasing these knowledge, skills, and competencies in the nuclear field. Next one, please. Okay, go. Next one. Next one. Okay. So, what we are doing, all these projects are financed by the European Commission. All these projects refers to an area which European Commission invested in terms of education and training. So we are dealing with safeguards and security. We are dealing with mobilities. We are dealing with research infrastructures. We are dealing with medicines or production of medical radioisotopes. Mobilities, when I'm saying mobilities, this means supporting people in getting the necessary knowledge, skills, and competencies, so an upgrade in the existing competencies of a person to become better, to become a better employee. And we are currently implementing a very generous program with respect to these mobilities. So people can travel around Europe or outside Europe to increase their competencies. Next one, please. So we have radiochemistry, leadership for safety, reactor safety, small modular reactors, and that's it? Yes. Thank you. Go for the last one, please. The last one. Okay. I'm just going to leave here this year. Thank you very much.
Bon, évidemment, c'est...
I'm sorry. Blame it on Christophe. Sorry. I must say that this is certainly a very interesting area, education and training. It would be a brilliant idea to have a colloquium exclusively dedicated to education and training. We know that there is much that needs to be done. We know the shortcomings. We know that the bar has been raised very high in France. But the problem is that we are lagging behind. The problem is that there is a loss of trust in the sector. On top of the different efforts, we need ambitious public policies. We really need very ambitious public policies. Otherwise, the younger people will no longer make the choice of taking up scientific studies. And if we cannot manage having a European training system that ensures some mobility, because we certainly need to make sure that we further enhance the mobility among workers. Otherwise, there won't be a real industry. I won't go into any more detail.
Voilà. Alors, vous m'excuserez, on revient à notre table.
Sorry, so we're coming back to our round table. I see frustrations. I'm sorry. Yes, you were anticipating questions for Christophe, but sorry. Well, cooperation in the sector is very important as well. We will now be talking about nuclear waste. You know that this is something which is particularly dear to my heart. You know that we had one edition of our Entretien Européen about waste. So, Daniel, the floor is yours. Tell us what cooperation does already exist internationally when it comes to waste. And I'm not talking high-level waste, radioactive waste, but all waste. And you've got 10 minutes, by the way. You have 10 minutes. Well, my presentation is a bit long, so I'll try to move fast. Thank you, Claude. When Claude asked me to discuss this, I had already a few ideas in mind, and I was thinking about presenting what already exists. But then I thought, when did this all start? When did this international cooperation start on the management of radioactive waste? So I did some archaeology and found, premises of cooperation projects when I was already a boy. So, I mean, this was in the 70s and the 80s. We had the first cooperation agreements signed by ANDRA and with European partners, Swiss, Belgians, Germans. So this is, in fact, a long history. We have a long history of cooperation on radioactive waste. Let me try and look at this very quickly and show you what's going on today at international level and what does ANDRA do. Now, just one slide to show you. Well, let's keep in mind that the 90% of the volume of waste produced in France today is, in fact, part of a waste recycling system. CGO for geological storage and FAVEL represent a large part of the volume. A big part of radioactivity is in it, but we have solutions, fully operational solutions to manage waste. And these are supervised and controlled in a fully transparent manner. There are many publications on what we do. Let me focus on CGO first. CGO is for high activity, higher level and low level, long-lived waste. So CGO is the geological storage in France, and this formally started in 1991 with a law. This was more than 30 years ago. And at first, they were mainly staffed by people from COGEA or CMA that started this project, and a number of researchers joined as well. The scientific community was extremely mobilized on this topic, and the idea was, what do we want to prove there? So mobilizing this scientific community, people who were used to talking to their foreign colleagues through conferences, who were used to discussing research projects. This is how international cooperation could rapidly start. It started fast because questions did not focus on nuclear materials precisely, but rather about what we want to do with this storage. So it started in 91 for ANDRA, and we rapidly started discussing with those who wanted to move towards geological storage, just like France. And the idea was to in fact, start cooperating. We have now a network of partners, and we are cooperating with our partners. These cooperations take place at IAEA, OECD, NEA, but also EURAD, which is the European partner. It's part of the project as well. And we have small targeted cooperations, which are rather targeted on direct cooperation with waste managers in the various countries in which we would like to progress. Well, I will not present IAEA or NEA. IAEA is rather focusing on the preparation of standards and guides and on developing best practice and uniting a community of people who want to work on radioactive waste. So we created working groups, we shared expertise, And we tried to produce standards, highlight best practice, and make sure people would talk to one another. NEA is a bit more targeted. We are working a bit more on technical issues, exotic issues, if I may say, reversibility, for instance. What does it mean? Or creating databases, database and other international projects, one on economic and social studies, for instance. So with them, we are working much more closely. There are no newcomers. We know all the partners, and we try to focus on targeted cooperation with them. And we try to exchange on best practices, practices that we think are good, that we want to promote, or that we want to challenge internationally to add value to our national approaches via this international support. We also have EDRAM, and Claude knows this association very well. This is the International Association for the Disposal of Radioactive Materials. This is an agency which meets twice a year. All our directors meet twice a year, and we discuss very strategic questions. Who do we want to embark with us? What do we want to do? What are the strategies we need to develop in the countries? And this is one way of looking into the difficulties some may have, because certain points have progressed in some countries, but it's not the case everywhere. And so how can we develop small cooperation projects between implementers? Reversibility is one project, for instance, the assessment of geological disposal cost. How can you assess the cost of that geological disposal? So these are projects over many years, and of course they need to be fully mature to be approved. So we have another project with them. It's a project about communication, about involving the public in our projects, because these are societal projects, and it's very important to have the citizens on board. And so the idea is to integrate all these points. So it's, in fact, between agencies, really. And then there's a big program, and this brings me back to what we said before. The scientific community, which is very much contributing to these projects, is a community that was used to cooperating. We have EURAD now, and these European projects make it possible to really pool the resources of these research communities, implementers, industrial leaders. The idea is to work together on scientific issues, technological issues. Funding is coming up to 50% from Europe. So Europe is part of it, and we have made significant progress. We have a website for EURAD, we have publications, we have progress in our projects. And so a second EURAD should start in 2024. One last minute. Right, so very quickly. In some cases, we have projects for operators, such as waste disposal center managers, and we also have European partners for such projects. We know these partners. They have sites, operational sites, and we develop with them bilateral cooperation agreements, which means our experts travel and meet with the experts locally. We try to define common topics. If we have an issue, a common problem, well, we start to look into that together with two people. It's always easy. I was in Bure with the British colleagues. It was our first steering committee, and we've launched this cooperation project with the British. They have one centre of interest in the eastern part of the UK, and it would be a site which is actually on a clay land. And so the idea is how to set up a site on such land. Thank you very much, Daniel. I am amazed at the huge work done upstream and downstream of the construction of these power plants. The work that is done on uranium, but also recycling and disposal of waste. It's a work that is not widely known, despite the efforts that were made and despite the failures of the public debate committee in France. It did not really help the debate progress further, but simply acted the fact that we did not agree. So this was a public debate that was not successful, and we thought that this may not be the right way to proceed. No, I will, of course, have other questions for you later, but we will have the last speaker first because we have another roundtable and we are 30 minutes late at this point. So, Luc, the floor is yours. Luc, I'd like you to talk about the way the sector is working on innovation to create the nuclear power of the future, because we want a sustainable nuclear power. Gen 2 must be sustainable, Gen 3 must be improved, Gen 4 must be ready. So where do we stand? Yeah. Of course, in front of me, there's a very efficient tool by Claude, so I will respect my time. Now, you will hear next many times because I've got many slides, but I will not describe the first slides in too many details because we already heard during the day why nuclear, what are the assets, what are the liabilities, pros and cons. Of course, where does our activity come from? Let's energize sustainability. This is precisely the point. This is a transition towards sustainability. It's a political but also societal transition. And from the point of view of the infrastructure and from the point of view of energy, we need to move faster. Hence the idea of energizing the transition towards sustainability. And this requires a great deal of sustainable energy. I will not discuss the challenges because I thought I had more time. But okay, next and next. We've been discussing that this morning already there.
Slides, I just would spend at most 1 minute. I always like this presentation of about 10 years ago, Dave McKay. A really good book. Everybody should know it already by heart. But that slide over there, the graph over there, shows you the population on the horizontal axis and the number of greenhouse gases emitted per capita on the vertical axis. Now you know that the population is growing and that the energy intensity and the energy needs per capita is growing as well. And if you click next once more, the box that you will show there, next, I think now, the box you will show there is the box that we are allowed to in a sustainable scenario. So you can see it's really a hard problem. Next, not next, sorry, the next point I would like to raise is, you know, the energy cliff dilemma. And I know I'm not already talking about innovation like Claude asked me to, but there's a lot of innovation, and I introduced it from there. From the 70s, 60s, there was a lot of oil, very easy to find oil, you had a lot of energy out of that. But the more and more we exploited oil, the more and more it became harder, and that's the energy return on energy invested graph, to find that oil. We see it now, the prices are rocketing, etc. If you do a few nexts now, you will see some blobs, and you will see the new technologies. You will have the wind, you will have CSP, you will have oil, you have solar. Please go next, 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 a few times, 4 or 5 times probably. And there you have nuclear next. And nuclear, next, nuclear is the only one that remains on the left side. Now, what is the left side? That yellow vertical line is the line which is currently the auto-financing line criterion. Left of it, you can live structurally without subsidies. Right of it, you have systematically a need of subsidies. Okay? Now that line is changing, obviously, over time, etc. where is innovation? If we're looking to society and we're looking especially to energy-intensive industry and industrial clusters, this is talking. We did recently a few studies for industrial clusters, and there they're saying, well, we can't really believe on the right side of that yellow line anymore. Because governments become poorer, the current geopolitical situation doesn't help us neither, etc., etc. So we have to get that independence, and that independence will need both those blobs that fall down off that cliff, as well as one of those blobs that is remaining upper left being nuclear energy. Next. That subtitle you will read in the slides afterwards. Next. So what can we do? And now you can do a few times next. Of course, a lot has been said, but of course we have to deliver nuclear really correctly. We have to remain competitive. You have to do quite a lot. We heard a lot on Gen 4. I just want to say there's a lot of innovation. Currently worldwide, the budget for Gen 4 is a few percent of the money spent annually by industry, nuclear industry, to improve the operations of the plant, to improve the fuel, to make sure that there are upgrades, etc., to make sure that the next generation is running, etc. And of course, we are also doing SMRs, and we are also going to do fast reactors, and maybe others as well. But it's only yet a few percent. Don't forget what we already have in hand, and what we will keep in hand in the next few decades. Next. Next. Okay, we do not lack options. We do not lack options at all. And if we look to nuclear on the lower horizontal axis and on the vertical axis, next, we have the LWRs and we have the CANDU reactors. Okay, they deliver electricity. They deliver district heating, and they can also do water desalination. Most of them work in an open fuel cycle or in a mono-recycling cycle, and there's a lot of development. Now you've seen it already. You can go to fast reactors, and they are going to address maybe higher temperatures, and they are going to improve the cycle, fuel cycle. And next, you can go even further. You can go to high-temperature gas-cooled reactors, and you're going to address new markets, for instance, industrial process heat, looking to high temperature or hydrogen generation, etc. But you might also further improve the fuel cycle by multiple recycling, like France is considering, or other countries that are going into that direction. Next. And of course, yes, like Mr. LAFERRERE already referred to, Armand, was you can go to an innovation like molten salt reactors. Yes, molten salt reactors, they can do both on the innovation axis on the energy market as on the fuel cycle axis, because they can fulfill an intra-nuclear role as well as being in an energy market role. Next. And there you have maybe even ADS for some countries that still believe in it. Now, the SMRs, where to position the SMRs? From my perspective, and from quite a lot of perspective, and now I'm talking a little bit disclosing on the activities that we have been undertaking over the last few years, and I have 1 minute left, I think. 30 secondes encore plus. We have a new market, a lot of industrial clusters, energy-intensive industries are in an existential mode in Europe today. And you can blame a lot by politics to Putin, you can blame him a lot, but not that we created our own lunatic energy system where we are highly dependent on external factors. That's our own stupidity. So a lot of innovation with nuclear, where nuclear will have its role, might come from that kind of scheme. I'm not blaming this kind of scheme as an example, but the scheme, because we've done a lot, thanks to France, to a lot of organizations, European programs, like also Gabriel was mentioning, on the vertical axis. We master it, or we can master it in due time. But a lot of innovation will come from the horizontal axis. Next slide, and that will be the concluding one, Claude. Okay, we are in an energy crisis, but more existentially, we are in a systems crisis. Over here in Europe, a lot of our infrastructure dates from the 70s. We have to reinvent our urbanization. We have to reinvent our energy structure. There, in every part, nuclear can play its role. Big, small, fast reactor, small reactor, thermal reactor, whatever. If we want to embrace a sustainable nuclear European energy future, we'll need to cluster even more. And I know time is running out. I'll stop there. Maybe there will be a place for questions later on. Thank you.
Un grand merci. Alors, je suis désolée.
I'm sorry, but we're not going to take questions. But we've had very important information here. Anyway, you will get the slides, and like Christophe said, you can send your questions, your comments to the speakers, and you know, we will try to answer those questions, and we will send you the conclusions of this conference in the minutes.